Good morning. Again, if you were with us in the last session, I'm still Porter Anderson after 2 days, and it's great to see you, all of you here, for what's a very special and exciting executive talk for us here at Publishing Perspectives Forum. As you may know, that we always try to speak to a couple of the very leading CEO figures in the world of publishing, and this is a chance for us to hear from them close up and to understand their vision of where we're all going, because the height and the experience that comes from so much of what these good folks have done is just invaluable to all of us. As a journalist, it's a goldmine, as you can imagine. This is a great pleasure for me. And it is really wonderful to welcome Arnaud Nourry, who is one of our best speakers. I think one of the things I like the most, Arnaud, is how beautifully you articulate what you're looking at. I started my critical career with dance, and I discovered at that point that dancers couldn't speak. They might look fantastic on the stage, but they had a very difficult time working in language. This one works in language. You'll find it fascinating, I'm sure. What we're talking about, too, I'll just take a couple of moments for any of you who may not know the moment and the pivot that's occurring here. And it's bigger even than the company we're talking about this morning, as Arnaud and I were just talking about. There is a new venture in Paris, and Arnaud Nourry has started this with a group of very specially adept and sensitive publishing people who are creating Les Nouveaux Éditeurs. And this is a collective, if you will, at this point. That's probably a safe term, that you're a collective of publishing entities who are working for a different purpose necessarily than what we're accustomed to seeing so many of our best publishers work in the corporate context. Of course, with a background as once the CEO and president and publisher and chair of Hachette Livre for many, many years, about 18 years, I think, in that title. Arnaud has seen everything and basically done everything and was driving so many marvelous moves in the corporate publishing world for so long. A person of great value to the development of the industry worldwide. Today, he is working in a different means because he's coming in as an independent. And this is an extraordinary change, but it has a very special reason. What I think I'd like to do, Arnaud, is start by asking if you could explain to us what the intent is of Les Nouveaux Éditeurs. What are you looking to make happen by creating this group together, and what is the ethos? What are the tenets of what you're doing?
Thank you for the introduction.
Of course.
I'm afraid there are two major misunderstandings. I'm not a top CEO. I'm a small guy starting from scratch, and second, I thought I would speak in French, which at the moment I may turn to, because my English is kind of 5 years old. But anyway,
that's terrific. Don't worry.
The story around Les Nouveaux Éditeurs, which I'm afraid you pronounced in a very American way.
I'm sorry for that.
We need to spend 10 minutes together. I can train you a little bit.
Good. And I'll give you the American apology.
Les Nouveaux Éditeurs. The idea is one in the French publishing industry in the last years. We've seen many changes with corporate shareholders taking the reins of the number 1 and 2, with family-owned businesses in the process of changing generation, with other businesses being sold. And it's a fast-changing landscape where talented people in their 40s, 50s just wonder, where should I go? And I've been approached by a lot of these talented people asking me, do you have any advice about where I could land for the next and probably last period of my professional life? So that's one reason for the new venture. The second reason is, in France, publishing is one of the key voices in public debate by all standards, and I'm unsure that intensity of publishing activity in the public debate will remain unchanged in the future because of the changes I mentioned. That's an understatement. I need to be very polite here. And then the third key observation is we have a lot of new publishing businesses launched in France every year, basically by people in their early 30s, because when you're young like that, you can accept to not get paid for 2 or 3 years, particularly if your parents can give you some soup and bread from time to time, and the cost of printing 3,000 copies of a book is next to zero, so you can try. But then when you're in your 40s, there's no way you're going to launch your publishing business because you have kids, you have a mortgage, you cannot afford not being paid. You have authors who already are successful, and the cost of buying the contracts out of their existing publisher is quite high. You don't have access to sales and distribution and manufacturing at a reasonable cost. And on top of that, your authors may tell you, I love you, but please get started. And we'll see in 2 years' time if you're still there running, and I will join. So it's very difficult for the most talented people of the next generation to create their own business. And my idea is all about that. So Les Nouveaux Éditeurs is kind of a platform where talented people in their 40, early 50s, and by that I mean they have 15 years to create, build, and enjoy the adventure. They come and they're going to find the financing, the sales, distribution, IT, coaching, because I've got some experience in helping people being successful in publishing, and the opening with our agreement with Simon & Schuster. And basically they take little risk, and we bring them what they need to be successful. And that's the story around Les Nouveaux Éditeurs. So we announced, I say we because I've embarked my older son, who is just here, Hugo, because I'm, with time I became lazy. So I need someone to really work with me, and he's doing that. He's the CEO of the company. So we've announced in June the concept. We've announced the first imprint 3-4 weeks ago. And it's likely that we'll announce 3 or 4 more imprints from now to Q1. Children publishing, fiction, non-fiction, for adult, for covers, etc., etc. The only exceptions will be textbooks and college books, because that's a different market in which I don't want to be involved. So Les Nouveaux Éditeurs is kind of an incubator for talented people to come and find everything they need, plus someone who has experience in running a publishing business to be successful. And when they are successful, we buy them out before they retire. So it's also a good way to make some money before retiring. Happy to answer any question later if that isn't clear.
It's a fantastic introduction. Thank you for starting us off so well. And welcome, Hugo. Glad you're with us as well. I was struck when the information was first given to us in the news media about what you were doing with this phrase. The focus of the new venture was to be on talents that depend on a sustainable commitment to achieve success. And immediately I remembered something that Kamala Shamsi said. I am not being Republican, by the way. It's Kamala, not Kamala, in that sense. Kamala Shamsi in London, the author, said to me once that she could not have succeeded to the great degrees that she has, a marvelous writer with many, many awards, if Bloomsbury hadn't stayed with her in the first 10 years when she was making mistakes, having problems, not getting things off the ground as was expected, and yet she had a very faithful publisher. And in a sense, I hear something of that kind of comment in this, saying that a talent depends on a sustainable commitment, that you'll still be there if things don't just go right through the roof at the beginning, right?
Well, it's an endeavor on the very long term.
Yeah.
We all know, the cost of creating a new imprint in France is, let's say, shy of €1 million. It's not gigantic, but it's significant money. Yeah. And it probably takes 3-4 years to go to break even, and then much longer to really blossom. So we're here for the long run, and the editors, the authors, they know that. And I have to say, by embarking my son, who is a heavy reader and is excited about the project, I also send the message that it is, let's say, forever. It's funny, in France, we like to think about publishers like Hachette, who will celebrate their second century anniversary in a few years' time, or Gallimard 1 century, etc. But if we want to celebrate all publishing companies in 1 century, we need to create them today, right? This is what we are doing. We cannot celebrate legacy imprints without creating the next ones, and we, we're going to be a bit disruptive. I mean, the model I just mentioned it exists in the music industry, it exists in the TV production industry. It does not exist in publishing for reasons I'm not aware of. I should, because I was the chairman of the number 3 worldwide before, but that's a fact. So we are not really inventing a model, we're importing that model within an industry that was probably a bit shy about how the value is spread over the actors. So we're going to be disruptive. There is another dimension, which I guess I should mention, of disruption. In France, author contracts are signed for 1 century, which is quite long. I mean, you would agree on that, right? It's not 1 century, by the way, because it's forbidden by law. It is 70 years after the death of the author. So as an average,
right.
It's more than 1 century. And I'm not aware of any country in the world where this is the way publishing operates. And it's not necessary, because most books, they live for just 6 months. But for those books who last, I think we need to rebalance the power between the author or the heirs and the publishers. And we will take some initiatives in that respect too, because it's needed, and authors really are pushing very hard for getting something. So we'll be there.
That's fascinating. What's another form of disruption that you are most interested in how things are going?
What fascinates me is, I mean, I've been in publishing. I started in 1990, so that's quite a long time ago, and I've been running a major company for a long period of time. Starting from a white piece of paper is fascinating, because you can think of the way you organize the processes, the way you embark people inside the company or keep them outside the company. You can really think about the organization of the business in a massively different way. You can also think about embarking some AI within the processes without damaging the life of people who are already working for you, which is probably one of the reasons why the publishing industry has not embarked yet that much AI, because it's, when you have 35 people working in your imprint, you don't want to tell 10 of them, sorry guys, there is a machine that's doing the job much better than you do, and we're starting from scratch. So it's much easier for us to approach the organization of an imprint in a different way, and we are just at the beginning of that. So that's fascinating, and it will be disrupting.
Is the approach, I mean, on the ground at the most basic level, is the approach normally an invitation from your organization to someone you're interested in working to, or do they come to you with their interests?
As we speak, it's about 50-50.
Is it?
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I like the idea that those who join us are enthusiastic about the reinvention of something very big in our societies.
Right.
So I'm very happy to have embarked people who just knocked on the door. But it's half-half, yeah.
Right.
And to be clear, I'm not targeting any company. I've learned in my professional life that there are 3 key success factors in publishing: talent, talent, and talent. So that's, I'm having breakfast, lunches, and dinners with talents. That's what my life is about, during which Hugo is working more seriously. I could have approached the problem by saying, I want an imprint on romance, I want an imprint on manga, I want some comics, I want some blah, blah, blah. That never works, as you know, because the time you need to spend finding the right talent, buying contracts, publishing. Meanwhile, 3, 4, 5 other groups have launched the same initiative, and the market has changed, and you're left with an imprint specialized in romance with no longer any market for romance, and someone who is talented in romance. So that's not what we're creating. I'm looking for talent. They have full independence, and it is legally binding for us. It's in the contract we signed. We have no right to interfere with their publishing plan, which is very unique. So no political pressure, no, me bombarding an imprint with some ideas that does not exist, but that freedom to publish whatever they want has a price. Another imprint within Les Nouveaux Éditeurs could do more or less the same. So it's really not marketing driven, our vision. It is entirely talent driven, and that's very different.
This makes great sense because, again, going back to the initial announcement, which set a lot of us really on our heads when we first heard of this. I think in June was when most of us on that side of the Atlantic were getting hold of this idea. There were a couple of tenets that, in fact, I've put here to remind myself to ask you about. One is a substantial minority stake in someone's publishing house, best-in-class contracts, sustainability, and ecosystem friendliness. When did you last hear the company you're working with talk about ecosystem friendliness? It's fantastic. Diversity and accessibility, leading-edge technologies, as you were mentioning, leadership by being a trailblazer in workplace and environmental practices. This is extraordinary because this is a chance, as you're saying. I mean, it feels like to invent the world again. We look at things as being set in stone so long. And it must be very freeing, yeah?
I mean, listening to you reading what I declared in June leads me to having some regrets.
Now I caught you.
The good thing with PR is that you can drop a few words like that, and then you just escape. But the bad thing is that then 3 months later you find a guy who remembers. This is where I am now. We're going to do our best. We're going to do our best. What is sure is that the people joining us, they have a very significant stake in their business, and this is unique. So it is their imprints within a collective adventure. This is for sure. When you start from zero, it's much easier to be environmental friendly. It's much easier to have fun, to and enjoy being in the same project than when you run a company with 6,000 people working all around the world. We'll do our best. And frankly, the way I interfere with people and make the decision to embark them or not is also based on that. If they don't share the value, the vision, the desire to disrupt, I don't think they should join us. And so that's one of the criteria I have in mind when I dine or have breakfast with people.
Right. I understand this perfectly, especially because before we began this morning, Arnaud and I were talking about Madeleine McIntosh. I think many of you know Madeleine. I can't tell if she's here. You should understand we have enormously bright lights in our eyes here, so it's hard for us to see anyone in particular. But Madeleine is doing a fascinating thing with Don Weissman and with Nina von Moltke, who is with us later in the week, as a matter of fact, in our forum. And they have created in New York a company called Authors Equity. It's just put up in March. So these are both very new ventures, but very similar tenets and very interesting concepts of author centricity, talent centricity. It doesn't even have to be the author. Working with people who someone wants to work with, making a choice for what you'd like to do, and feeling stable, feeling like there's a commitment there on your behalf in order to protect. I'd like to think that particularly because we're seeing people from the corporate world, Madeline was, of course, the CEO in the United States for Penguin Random House, very effective, wonderful and wonderfully loved CEO in that position. But in her new guise, she's actually, again, creating something from scratch, the blank piece of paper, putting down on it the tenets that she likes. Many of them sound much like these. And it's a fascinating moment, not a big moment yet, because we're talking really about a small group of people we're seeing doing this in two different major locations. But the trend appears to be coming out of the corporate background and going into almost a more humanistic background, something that starts with the person, whichever person that is, and what they need and what they want and what can be provided. The question that brings to my mind, Arnaud, is when you were in Hachette, when you were in the thick of and the height of your work there, which was often fantastic, of course, were you seeing this? Were you able to conceive of, or interested in conceiving of, or finding yourself conceiving of, something in which the center was different, the thing was not structured as it is in corporate? Or was that not something you would see while inside that group?
Well, just to start with, your Madeline is a friend. We had breakfast together this morning.
Yes.
And it's quite fascinating to see how converging the two approaches are. Although there are differences too, because in the US, the role of agent is much, much bigger than what it is in France. And the key talent in the US for a publisher would be the author, and offering authors a different business model consisting in no advance but a massive profit sharing and a quality of service that is designed to the precise need of the author. It makes a lot of sense. In France, as the agent community is not as active by miles, the key talent is the editor, who will come with his authors. So we are not targeting exactly, we have the same disruption in mind, but we are approaching the markets in a different way because they are structured differently. This being said, I was fascinated this morning by what she has in mind, and we may also test approaching a few authors directly with a different business model, and I think it's worth trying. To your second question, when you run a company that publishes 17,000 new books per year in 10 languages, and these books represent 50% of the turnover of the company, you have no spare time to think about how things could be organized in a different way. You just focus on being sure that this is run properly and delivers. Hachette was the key subsidiary of a listed company in France, so no time to think about ways to operate differently, frankly. Mm-hmm. We tried in France once or twice to embark independent publisher on a different status. I remember Florent Massot being attached to Grasset for a few years. Florent is a very talented guy, but didn't really work because there is no oxygen alongside major group for independent. You really need to think out of the box and start a different organization, I guess.
Yeah. I find this fascinating. I've spoken at length with Madeline as well, and what is interesting, she would say exactly the same thing. I'm sure that when you're in the process of doing the work that she was doing at Penguin Random House, you're not musing on a different approach, and yet I have heard her talk about how at least at the point she was moving past that work, she was able immediately to see some things that made sense in her mind, like what an author might have needed at one point. And now this is nobody specific that she's talked to me about, of course, but what someone in the creative side might have needed at some point that in the corporate realm was just not possible to provide. The numbers are the numbers, and there are moments where you just can't make something happen, because it would be even the enriching thing to do. And I think it's fascinating to watch both of you spend some time away from the earlier career and come into something, as you're saying, that does have parallels to it. It's thrilling, and I guess, well, I could ask this: when you came from the Hachette, when you were moving out and looking at your next step or not a next step, did you want to do something immediately at all in publishing going forward, let alone this?
Not at all. I was fired. This is no secret. After 18 years, for reasons that do not need to be explained, I became a grandfather, thanks to the guy just here, which is, the timing was perfect. And I just thought, I'm done. I was 60 years old. I accepted 3 years of non-compete just because I really thought I would never be back in that industry. I'm done. I've run one of the top publishing companies. I'm not going to start something else, blah, blah, blah. And then because of the changing environment in France, because of the attempt to merge Hachette and Editis, and the case at Brussels, in which I was to some extent involved, I started, but it came as a surprise to me. I started wondering whether I should do something, and certainly I needed 2 or 3 years of full break to have fresh ideas, because when you've been in publishing for 30 years, it's difficult to the day after start thinking out of the box. And I've approached several publishers in the course of this year to try to embark them, and one of these was a very commercial, very successful publisher, told me, you know what, I think your idea is great, but I'm in charge of a company, and if I invest in your business, people in my company will not understand why I do that and not apply the same recipe within the company. And so that is another way to explain why it's difficult to have one foot in one system and the other foot in a very different one. So.
Oh, I can see that. There's an immediate appearance of conflict that people are not going to understand. It's a fascinating, I keep using the word, but I'm also grateful, because it means that we're getting some of our best people back, in a way. When they leave the seat from which we knew them best, we haven't lost them. With some time, at least in these cases, they come back to us with something probably more valuable and incredibly interesting. And very hopeful. This is an exciting thing for anybody close to the creative side in particular, because it sounds like for once the business could actually be there to help you, to serve you. The word serve is in these words you were throwing around in June too. And it's a very important word, and it's wonderful to see. Service is something that we don't talk enough about. I don't want to keep Arnaud only to myself. And so if any of you have questions that you'd like to bring to us, we won't be able to say that. I think I actually saw a hand there. I'm amazed with the lights there.
We don't see the faces, we just see the ends. I see one here. That's a guy I know.
You're safe in anonymity.
I hired him 6 years ago.
And we have microphones that are going to come to you. Have wonderful people who are getting an awful lot of exercise when we do these things, running around to you. I think we had someone right down here. If we could get a mic on the center aisle here. And there, I'm seeing the hand again against the glare.
Thank you, Arnaud. And you emphasize the fact that you're integrating AI into your publishing processes. Could you please elaborate a little more on how you are leveraging AI into your publishing houses?
I think it's a bit early days for that. For me to be very specific, and frankly, I'm the 63 years old guy in the duo with my son, who is 33. So he's the one who should answer. I think there is a lot to be done in digital marketing, in producing commercial documentation, in pitching to foreign publishers, in the processes, in making decisions on print runs, on where to ship copies, etc. So there's a lot of the scope for AI in publishing is quite wide. What our priorities will be remains to be seen. I mean, we're only 4 months in the story. I was under non-compete until April, so I did nothing before. So, you know, I'm afraid, Nicola, you have to be a little bit patient. And on top of that, you're a competitor of mine, so I'm unsure I want to discuss that with you. Although I hired you 7 years ago, it's a different setup now. But let's have lunch.
The lunch sounds good. We have some back there. Yeah. Hi.
Yeah. Oh, c'est moi? Okay. Merci, Monsieur Nourry. A question, you've shared a great deal about the changes in the industry and the business. At the same time, there's been a lot of changes for readers and the reading. I wonder if you have any perspective on the new reader in this new world that you're creating.
That's probably the key question. And I could have started with that one. Thanks for asking. I'm very optimistic about the book business, which I may be the only one to have been optimistic for 20 years. You know, I know that the markets are tough as we speak, but they've been tough 10 times in 10 years. Let's not forget that. For different reasons, it's a resilient, non-growing industry. But it is changing. And I mean, the romance phenomenon, I think, speaks a lot about change of generation, change of taste, change of the way readers want to have access to the books or the content. I don't like the concept of content. So I think we are approaching a fast-changing period for the way people read and who they are. I mean, the old generation of what we called heavy readers, which were mainly women in their 50s buying 12 to 20 books per year, that is probably winding down a bit. And we need to be very careful about not purely repeating the same schemes, the same tests for manuscripts, because if we do that, we're going to become a club of very, very sophisticated editors publishing the books they want to read themselves, which is not a business at the end of the road. So we need to be very open-minded about what's going on in, you know, outside the cities, outside the heavy readers community. I was quite fascinated. One of the imprints we're going to announce in the months to come is coming with a very talented woman whose key author is from the northern suburb of Paris. She's Muslim. She's never told her parents that she's writing something. She dare not say that she's making money with being an author. That's an entirely new territory, and she sells big times. So, which means that there is a readership, there is an audience for these kind of new voices. We need to be there. And Les Nouveaux Éditeurs will be very active. Let's not forget that we have no growth in the market, but I mean, in France, probably 15-20% of the population can read and never buy books. That's a massive potential there. I mean, we should not complain about the fact that books are a bit intimidating and at the same time, we don't change the form, the price, where they are sold, where people can access to them. So we need to be more agile, I guess, because readers of tomorrow's readers will not resemble the readers we enjoyed in the last 25 years. That I'm sure of. So it's a key question, but I don't believe marketing is the key tool for understanding that. You need to hire talented editors coming from the most diverse places.
I think what you're saying too is very specially that it takes some new ventures of the kind that we're discussing to actually start revealing the evolution of the readership, yes? Because we don't see it as long as the structure at the center stays the same and is rigid. Yeah, this question came to us, this good question, by the way, from Chris Keneally, who's been with the publishing world for a long time. It's good to see you, Chris. Glad you're here. Thanks for that. Who else has something for us? We can't see you, but you can see us. There's a hand right there, I see, against the light. Sure. And here's it's Ed. Hi.
Hi. I'm curious, you were famous for saying in 2018 that ebooks were a stupid thing.
God.
I know. I'm sorry to bring it up.
Let's remember, I did not say that.
Oh my
My
God!
colleague in
It
journalism
had
said
to
that.
happen.
It had to happen. But I'm curious. I'm actually not asking.
Do you know where I was?
I would like to know, sure. Tell us.
Yeah, I was in India,
Okay.
entirely jet lagged,
Okay.
not drunk.
Okay.
Not drunk, this is for the record, and I was communicating about the 10th anniversary of our subsidiary in India, and I'm afraid I was a bit out of control. Let's put it that way.
It's okay. We've all made
But
bad
you know what?
choices.
I was right.
Okay, so
I was right. I shouldn't have declared that, but I was right. Look at what happened since. The ebook market has declined massively, and the audiobook market has taken the biggest share. And that was my point. I mean, the value of an ebook is limited. It is cheaper, yeah, so, okay. You can bring your own library with yourself. It's useless, but why not? And it doesn't create much value to the user compared to a mass market edition. Or blah, blah. The audiobook has a lot of value. That was my point. Anyway, sorry for interrupting.
no,
you,
it's
but
okay. I did have a question.
You still
If you
have the
don't mind.
question?
I do.
My attempt was to help you forget the question.
You were
but
actually
I missed
circumventing
the point.
a question
Let's
I
try.
wasn't going to ask because the question I had is I was going to say that many people would agree with you that they have been a failure, especially in France. And I wanted to ask, because you're talking about innovation and the evolution of the industry, France has been spectacularly successful in sustaining its retail environment. You still have small bookstores on every other corner in Paris and throughout the country. And I'm curious how you see the retail environment developing in the future, because this seems, it's very challenging for booksellers around the world to sustain themselves. France has been very successful, which in many ways has helped prop up its own, publishing industry, which has remained relatively isolated to its own country, too. It has somewhat less engagement with the international community than others, insofar as it's able to make books that are unsuccessful elsewhere into bestsellers at home, but you don't see quite as many French books traveling and becoming these major blockbusters.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is related. I mean, we don't see often French books being bestsellers outside France, but I don't think it's related to your previous point. I mean, in France, we've been lucky enough to have a law passed in 1981 called Loi Langue, or it's kind of a net book agreement. And by that law, there is no discounting of books in France. So you buy your book at Amazon, or you buy it at Fnac, or you buy it in your local bookstore, same price. You may have a preference for the service you provided by the local bookstore, or you may like the kind of free shipping. It's no longer free, by the way, to Amazon because of now the law. I mean, everything has been done by several governments in France to protect the bookstore infrastructure, and we're the luckiest people on earth because of that. Because the book industry, it's not just entertainment, and I mentioned the point early in my presentation. It's about political engagement, it's about societal debate, and you need to find a place for books who are a bit difficult, who will get traction through newspapers and local bookstores, and this is about French publishing. I don't see that changing, because there is absolutely no desire, no political desire in France to change the law. And I mean, all publishers, we agree that we shouldn't touch even one comma of that law. This has been said, the economy is the economy. It applies to bookstores too. So if the market is not thriving with inflation, with rents, etc., some of the bookstores find their P&L a bit challenging, so probably we'll have a small decrease of the number of outlets, and that's sad. This being said, we have so many of them that I think we're immune to a massive change of the ecosystem. And that ecosystem, when I start telling that people in their 30s, they can start a publishing business, it is because of that. Because if they print 1,000 copies of a book, they're going to find 500 bookstores who will take one copy, read one copy, and probably advocate the book. That doesn't exist in many countries. It's very unique, and I think we're happy guys in the French market, for sure. I think at Hachette France, we serve 10,000 accounts in France. That's huge, 10,000 accounts. I think we have as many independent bookstores in France as there are in America. The size of the country is a bit different, I'm told.
Incredible. Thank you, Ed.
Sorry, I'm here in the end. I think you can't see me. Anyway,
Oh, there we are.
I'm asking a question from a grandfather. What is your favorite children book that you got for your grandson or daughter, and why?
Why? That's a tough one. I've spent 18 years never answering questions of that nature because I thought I'm not an editor. I'm a businessman in publishing, which is very different. So I always prevented myself from having opinions on books, not to, anyway. I'm a grandfather. My older one she's Louisa. She's almost 4 years old. And I'm a bit old-fashioned. I love a series called Ernest et Célestine. Magnificent books. And why? Because I think I read them to my son and daughter and other son when they were kids. And I like the graphism, I like the story. It's quite unique. And also she loves these books too. When she arrives at home, she said, "Oh, Panou, that's my name for her. I'm sorry, that's quite private information, don't repeat it." But she calls me Panou. So, where is the new Ernest and Célestine? And that's the way we start.
Hello. I'd like to come back to this retail question, but in a slightly different way. How do you see the second-hand market in France, but also as a general issue?
That's another very good question. I think the publishing industry within the last 3-5 years, and by saying 3-5 years, I'm not suggesting it happened after I left, but it happened quite recently because of inflation, because of requests from shareholders. The industry has increased prices quite significantly. The increase of paper also was a factor. We as an industry have increased the prices of the mass market edition at the same time. I think it has created more space for used books to become attractive, and that's a threat. It's a threat for the authors first because they get less money. There is no right on the second sale, which is a debate we have in France. In France, we love taxes, so there could be another tax on used books to then benefit the authors. I'm not sure it's gonna fly, but there is that debate. So it's a real threat. We need to be very careful in the future about keeping the prices at a level where people don't start thinking, I'm going to wait for 1 month before reading the book because I'm going to find it half price. It's very much linked to the previous question. The net book agreement in France has maintained an ecosystem that's extremely positive, and the used books can be a massively disrupting factor we need to fight against. And the only way we can fight is either through the law. I'm not a strong believer that it should go by the law, or by making sure that our price point remains accessible. But this being said, it is concerning. When it's just individual selling back the books they've read, it existed a century ago. But when it is about professional platforms or bookstores having outlets with used books, that becomes more difficult. But I'm not aware of any country having found the right response to that situation. But I see that books now are sold in France 23, 24 euros. It was rather 20 euros before. So, you know, there are limits for consumers. I guess we've reached these limits.
I think we have time maybe for one more question. Yeah.
Hello, bonjour. My question is a little more specific to Les Nouveaux Éditeurs. Is it only interested in French language books? Are you interested in multi-language imprints that might be based in France that have authors of different language backgrounds?
We are open-minded. The only thing I can tell you is that I have no ambition to launch Les Nouveaux Éditeurs in Italy or in Spain or in any other country. I'm done with international publishing, so we're going to be based in France, full stop. But we are absolutely entirely open-minded about publishing foreign voices, of course. It's a bit too early for us. I mean, we have no booth. We did not walk all the fair around to find books. It's not my business. I'm not an editor. But I guess next year, some of our staff will be trying to buy books, of course. Of course.
Merci.
Fantastic. I want to thank you, Arnaud, for a wonderful conversation. This has been terrific. It's wonderful of you to share all of this with us. And I'd like to thank all of you, too. Your interest and your questions have been terrific. And I feel like, when you say the French are lucky, I feel like we're lucky to have someone who's working in a new direction like this. This is good. It's good for the industry. And thank you for that. Good luck with it.
Thank you for having me here, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.